welcome to the Power Hour. This is our monthly session which we bring to PCD Club members to give them a bit of a boost, a bit of energy, some ideas, some creativity in the professional services world. We're joined by an audience of our members here on Zoom and a broader audience on YouTube, so welcome one and all. We're delighted to be joined in a double header today by two experts, Emma and Gary, who we're going to have a chat with in a minute. But yeah, today we're going to focus in on brands. We're going to have a reflective session that is going to give you some ideas on how you can position your brand going forward, your services, how you can build trust, how you can ultimately grow your business through communication strategy. So we're going to have a reflective, practical session here today. As always with PCD content, we love to hear from our audience. So if you're watching with us on Zoom or on YouTube, do put your questions in the comments and I will bring them on live to Emma and Gary. Good morning, Emma. How are you today?
I'm great, David. Nice to see you.
Brilliant. Looking forward to the session today, and welcome, Gary. Nice to have you on.
Hi, nice to be here, guys. I'm fresh from a new haircut. Thank you, Boris.
Looking smart. Thank you both. We're looking forward to a great hour ahead. As I said, put your questions and comments in the chat as we move through. Emma and Gary are going to share and pass between them a little slide deck that they've prepared as a framework for this discussion. I'm also going to be butting in, challenging them with some questions as we move through. So, Gary, if you want to share your slides and get us underway with some introductions, that'd be terrific.
Brilliant, thank you. Right then, guys. Okay, so our companies are Sidekick and a company called Harry, Larry and Gary. You know which company's mine, you know which company is Emma's. What I thought we'd do is just give you a little wee introduction as to what we're about. First, Emma and I work really, really closely together and have done so for too many years, let's just say. And so the reality is, let's just talk. The title of the presentation is called When You See Harry, Ask Him. More on that in a bit, but let's just call it some brand and marketing essentials. Okay, so HLG, the whys and the whos of who Harry, Larry and Gary are. Harry, Larry and Gary is my company, and it's a company of 7 creatives, web developers, photographers, gymnasts and acrobats. No, those 2 people don't come into it. But effectively, we are an agency that specializes in brand tonality and letting a business find its tone of voice. Excuse me, I just took a glass of water. The name is a curious one. And I'll tell you the name, and you too will have a glass of vodka in your hand after I tell you the name. So, in 2012, I was a brand director and creative director for a collection of big hospitality brands: Malmaison, Hotel de Van, De Vere Hotels, Village Hotels, etc. And we've built some pretty big brands over the years. Coming back from my mum's funeral, my wife and my 2 boys were run off the road by a hit-and-run driver in Northumberland, and the car was hit by a train. You couldn't write it. Harry, who was asleep in the back of the car, received a very severe brain shake and was in a coma for 6 months. He come out of it. Don't worry, the story is reasonably happy ending. Harry's now 21 years old and has a semi-independent life. But the reality of it is he couldn't talk because of the brain injury. And I likened it to business, because businesses have so much to say and they're absolutely passionate about what they believe in. But they don't know how to say it to the right people. And it's a really simplistic way of looking at it, but I choose to think that when Harry, if Harry ever gets his voice back, when he does choose to speak, there'll be an awful lot of expletives, let me tell you, for starts. But the wonder and the magic that will come out of his lips when he finally speaks will be incredible. And that's really what business branding is about. So that's the Harry part of it. The Larry part of it is named after brand contentment, happy as Larry. named after a guy called Lawrence Foley, who was an Australian prize fighter. Once you've got a brand, tone of voice, having that fight, which it is, and the street fight to actually keep your customers happy is an everyday thing. And you can never forget that. And Gary, sorry, I've only got one R in my name, but actually, I'm the guy that actually does that. And our speciality is brand tonality and how a business sounds, how it looks, how it feels. And we've worked across the hospitality sector extensively, but also across the financial sector over the last year or so as well. So that tonality is just as important as it is in the hospitality sector. Emma?
Thanks, Gary. I can't really beat that story. It's a pretty important story, and being there with you at the time, it was it's quite the thing that you and the family have been through. My story with Sidekick is very much as the name indicates, an attempt to marry my many years of professional services and financial services experience with my marketing, PR and business development background to offer people a specialist consultancy service to support businesses in those industries. Over the last few years, I've had particular experience in the private wealth space, and I've worked with family offices, banks, investment managers, law firms, accountancy firms, and organisations like STEP. In terms of the sorts of services that I provide, it's very much driven by my clients, who generally come to me with a good idea of what they want to do, and then in most cases they just need a bit of extra support. And that's where Sidekick comes in. And it might be support in terms of delivery. It might be support in terms of my industry experience and just wanting someone to come in with a fresh perspective, a new set of eyes on an issue. And really just supporting them and being in that role, which is very much where Sidekick came in. I had this, Gary and I remember when we were talking about my brand concept, I kept talking about Batman and Robin, didn't I, Gary? And and that's really where Sidekick comes in. So my idea is that I want my clients to be superheroes. It's not about me and what I do. I'm very much in the supporting role. We're living true to our branding approach by very much living our brands in our own companies.
Cool. Okay, so as David said, this is kind of like a top line refresher about brands, but I think what can tend to happen in my experience of a lot of years of working in the brand sector is that people can get very, very caught up in over-analysis and reading reports, and they seem to get too much of the detail and don't think about the big picture. And that can be dangerous, because if you don't solve that at the beginning, you're going to run into problems, and no spreadsheet on earth is going to solve it. So let's talk brands. That there's an order to things on how you should do it, and stick to it. And by the way, going out there and doing it yourself and deciding that you're going to create a logo or rip something from somewhere, that's the wrong order. That might be your logo eventually, but make sure you do it in the right order. First things first with brands, go deep. You've got to define why you exist. It's kind of one of those things where you wake up every morning and you throw back the covers and you go, why am I doing this? What am I bringing to the party for my clients? And ask yourself honestly, what am I going to do when I get up every morning? And if you can answer that, and it sounds good, and it sounds right, and it makes a difference, then at risk of sounding a bit like Greta Thunberg, I do apologize, you are one of the good guys. You're making a difference. It's about also where you really want to be in the future as well. Have an eye on that. Now, the reality to that is they fall into three categories: mission, vision, and values. When I get out of bed, this is my mission. When I look to the future, this is where I want to be. And you may not get there, but if you shoot for the moon, or you shoot for the stars and reach the moon, then you'll have gone some distance. And that's a good thing to have. An almost unattainable plan, something to reach for. My favorite vision of all is from a company called Merlin Entertainment, who have all the theme parks in the UK. And their vision was chase the mouse. It was as simple as that. And it was beautifully simple in the respect that they would go, I may not beat Walt Disney, I may not get to the coattails of Mickey Mouse, but I'm going to chase him for as long as I can. And the values are what effectively are your DNA. If you get those things sorted and you agree them with your board and you agree them with the people who matter in the business, then everything you produce thereafter has got to be correct, because that's the golden thread that is going to run through everything that you do.
Gary, I mean, on that, is that at a macro level, you've got the company defining the brand and mission, and then at a professional level, say, people are on their own mission. So it's like sort of integrating where people's individual values and businesses are under that umbrella. How do those two things like interplay? Do advisors just need to think about how they fit into the macro, the big picture story?
I've always been a fan that I'm doing some work at the minute with a lady who's a neuro-linguistic programmer who's breaking into the corporate sector. And the things that she finds is there's an awful lack of cohesion with businesses and brands. To me personally, the brand is king, and you buy into that brand when you go to work for it. Sure, you've got things to bring to the party, but I genuinely believe if the brand is king and you believe in the values, then you should kind of reflect that and bring your own twist to it. I don't genuinely feel that individuals should be bigger than the brand that they're creating. Yeah. Otherwise, it kind of be a brand on their own.
Yeah, and I think in the brand development process, so when you're going through a branding exercise, it's really important that you reach out to everyone in that organization, David, and you find out find something that unifies everyone, something that everyone can get behind. And there's normally something they're going to disagree. I mean, working with law firms, I know what it's like over the years. It's kind of, in many ways, law firms operate like in little silos within their practice areas, but you can normally find something that they can all get behind. And I think that's really important, because that's what people are going to remember. So, if everyone's going out there saying something different, that's fine, but they've got this one unifying message that you'll remember, and that people can identify with and make that emotional connection with, which is what branding is all about. It's finding something that people can connect to emotionally and feel like, yes, that relates to me, that I can see that they're the firm for me. That's really what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
So once you have your mission, your vision, and your values, that would be great if you're just going to sit in a silo for the rest of your life. But you've got to understand who you're talking to, and you've got to understand them brilliantly. Finding a voice or a tonality for what your brand is about is based on what you stand for and the language that resonates. So, for example, I've used this oblique phrase: no one's going to market to me with champagne. They're definitely going to market to me with champagne, but shampoo. I have absolutely no need, and you'd know that if you saw me. So if you knew me brilliantly, you'd know I wasn't going to listen to shampoo ads. Obsessed with champagne. Once you understood who you're talking to, and why you're here, and where you want to be, then you can get creative. And by brand tone of voice, I've kind of intimated this before, it's not just about the pretty pictures. I play that down really glibly, because as a guy who's had lots of years creating pretty pictures, it's about the message. It's about the feel. It's about what you say and also what you choose not to say as well. So it's a whole 360 of the senses, for want of a better word. Your brand is the music you play in your offices. Your brand is how your receptionist or your PA answers the phone. People are, and especially in hospitality, people are very much part of a brand. And the logo is only a very, very, very small part of it.
I mean, do you think this is a challenge for firms, say law firms that are full service firms, to talk, say, to the private wealth client as well as corporate and institutional clients, or in the fiduciary sector with a strong fund administration business and private wealth services? Or do you think this can all be balanced off and told in a cohesive way, even though the audience is?
I think my experience of over the last year during the pandemic, I got very heavily into the financial sector and the governance sector. And when you're selling a hotel or you are selling a bicycle, the product's really easy to see. So it's easy to make it look cool, for want of a better word. The reality is you have to dive a lot deeper, and you have to realize that the service that you offer, which is often intangible, is a lot harder to articulate. So you have to be really, really clear. I see a lot of identities and brands for law firms, for example, that are just names. And that's all right, as long as when you get to the website and the point of visibility, they really communicate what you stand for, and that resonates with the audience. It's really important that you articulate at the very beginning why you stand for what you're doing and why you are a point of difference compared to everyone else. If you don't do that, you're just another logo type with someone with a partner's name and the same values and the same shutterstock images that are pretty abstract because you haven't designed or haven't discovered what you're really about. So I see that a lot. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Emma, do you have a perspective on that and how that might affect the marketing strategy as well in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to value. So whether you're a corporate lawyer or you're a trustee or you're an investment manager, the values that we talked about that you set for your brand at the beginning run through that regardless. And I think that's, that's what it comes back to. So for example, in my business, some of my values are, that I'm hardworking, that I'm always going to be on your side, that I'm always there, I'm reliable. Those things are the same, regardless of whether you're a corporate lawyer or not. So it or a litigator or something else. So I think that's what you have to keep bringing it back to, and that's where you can make sure that as a business you're all pointing in the same direction.
Thanks.
Cool. Once you've got everything aligned and you've got what you stand for, I keep saying that because it's really, really important. Your DNA is all defined. You know exactly what you are without even having a pretty picture or a logo. And you know who you're talking to, and you've developed that tone of voice. So you know how you sound. You know how you feel. You know how the receptionist is talking. You've got a simple choice to make. You can behave like a plant and rely upon osmosis for your future client base to discover you, or you can actually get to their eyeballs. Really simple, really bluntly, be seen. And that visibility is truly, truly important, because all the good work that you'll have done on your tone of voice and your values and everything is just you in a silo, just waiting for someone to discover you one day, as opposed to going out there and fighting for it, like Larry. It can be a process that you need to be a little brave with. And by brave, I don't mean you're going out onto the battlefield or learning how to re-walk again like Harry had to. But be a brave little soldier. You've already done the hard work with what your brand stands for. You've already done the tone of voice. You've already agreed that all those things being correct for the audience. All you've got to do is take that step out over the parapet, stick your head above there and be seen. You've got the foundations. Emma?
Okay, so yes, so now you've got your brand nailed. How are you going to make sure that the people that you want to see it? So this is really about the first steps in terms of marketing your brand and launching your brand. And the first thing I'd mention there really is research. So you've got to really explore who your audience is, where they go, find where they play. And in professional services, you know, this is actually a lot easier to do than it is with consumer marketing. So, you know, there are niche industry sectors, there's geographic markets, there are ways of narrowing down your audience to make sure that your message gets out there, and really find your sweet spot. I think one thing that's important to mention here is that with business to business professional services marketing, the relationships that you have with clients and with business contacts tend to be long. They tend to be ongoing, and people know each other really well. So they know you, they know your competitors. You know, they're seeing them regularly in person in normal times, and online currently. So you've got to be really consistent. You've got to be out there and you've got to be on point. And yeah, you've really got to be known for something. And I think that's probably moving on to the next slide. But I think this is something that can be quite scary for people, because the temptation is, and I hear this a lot with working with professional services firms. Okay, so who's your target market? Well, our target market's global. Okay, so it's everyone. And what services are you offering? Well, everything. So you want to target everyone with everything. Well, you know, I hate to tell you, but you can't. And I think it's quite scary though for people to say, well, you know, I'm only going to focus on this, or I'm only going to focus on that, and I'm really going to push that, because they think, well, what if I miss out, and what if I don't get business in these other areas? But I think that finding your niche and hammering that message home is where you're going to find the most wins as a professional service firm. And by niche, I don't necessarily mean narrowing your scope so much that you only do one or two things, but I mean understanding who your clients are, what you do, what you can offer them, what you do well, and sticking to that message. So it's really about consistency of message.
Also, Emma, is it about, you know, research? The research leads into that, doesn't it? In a sense, so you can pick niche. If you've researched that, say, the Middle East is a good market for trust services, exactly, one builds to the other.
Then it all leads on. I'm working on something at the moment, and you know that we've through doing the research, through talking to their audience, the industry, the private wealth industry in this case, we've really sort of stumbled across a couple of things that we can now really hone in on, that their competitors aren't really doing, and that will really help them to stand out in the market. So yeah, the research phase is really important.
But do you think also, Emma, that niching down like that helps people with the sort of recall reflex of referrals, in the sense of if they see someone associated with quite a niche area, when that need comes up, you're the first of the queue, because you've gone to that, you've told the market, this is really where I'm at, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it? And people can't retain that much information, David. You know, you've got to be, when I think of, you know, particular areas of expertise, I think of particular people because they've been visible and their firm's been visible in that area, and they have that reputation. So reputation plus that visibility, it sort of really hammers home the brand message. So yeah. The end game. So this is about having a plan. So this is about when you've been through your branding process, you're developing your marketing plan. It's really important to have a plan, because only by having a plan can you make sure that you've covered all the bases, by laying out that plan, you keep going back to what you've learned, you remember your values, you remember your audience, you make sure that you've covered off all of these points, and only by laying it out in that way can you really make sure that you're delivering what you need to be delivering. If you end up getting sucked into, okay, we're going to do some marketing this year, but we haven't really got a plan, it's very easy to get distracted, and someone sends you an advertising opportunity, you see a conference come up, you think, oh, that looks good, I need to be there, I must be there, but you forget that, well, actually, is that where my focus is at the moment? Is that where my audience are?
Stick to the plan.
So you've got to stick to the plan. And it's not necessarily that you have to, it's about having a framework. I'm not saying that you rigidly stick to the plan, because obviously you've got to listen, you've got to have, you've got to adapt according to the market. In the last year, we found that out more than ever. You've got to be prepared to listen, see what's happening in the market, and pivot if you need to. But ultimately, you've got to have that overarching plan in place. And I think a lot of people still don't have that. They perhaps write a business development plan at the beginning of the year because their partners tell them they have to, and then they forget about it. They don't follow the plan.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to do it at the very beginning. I'll keep referring to it. It's really, really important.
Less is more. This is a real bugbear of mine over the years. So I see a lot of people, a lot of clients, when I worked in house, a lot of firms trying to do everything. And I think this is a real mistake. You don't want to overload your audience with all the things that you want to say. This goes back to what we were talking about before, David, about having a focus and things that you want to become known for, and focusing on those. Don't say lots of things, less. Say less. You'll lose people, you'll confuse people. For goodness sake, don't try and do everything. Focus on what matters, execute it really well, keep the message clear, and remember, what do you want them to remember you for?
How do you think, Emma, say if you've got a larger international brand with lots of people all trying to go on their own kind of mission, as it were, to build their own visibility. So there's lots of people you could be talking about in the social channels, through newsletters. Is it about just mapping that out in advance and sort of finding mechanisms to give people the spotlight they need in an organized?
Exactly, and just being organized and also it's about playing to people's strengths, David, because within a firm you'll have someone who's a really analytical, brilliant brain. They can be creating content that you're using in your pull marketing to get people to your site. They that use their strengths for that. There are other people who are extroverts and are brilliant at going out and networking and talking to people. Use them for that. So there's different parts of your marketing, and it's about, as a team, sitting down together. And this is why this team approach is really important, and playing to and being able to agree that you'll play to people's strengths and not drowning each other out. But at the same time, I do think it's important to be seen where you can, and especially in some of the bigger firms, that it's not just one person, that you've got a team behind you. So it's good to have multiple people out there, but try and have a plan.
Cool. Okay. Someone's just about to set off a garden strimmer. I'm just going to shout at them, so you may have to.
Okay, the wonders of Zoom. Okay, so this slide is really about frequency, and making sure that you keep your frequency up. So the law firms that have really done well in recent years that I've seen, and the fiduciary firms that have done well, have done this part really well. They've kept their presence up. They've you know, they've been really focused on their audience, and they've made sure that they're everywhere. They've saturated the market. I remember, I'm trying to think how many years ago it was now, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I think that Marant did this really well in the offshore world, in the trust and private client space. They had the right people in the right places, and they were just everywhere. And if you thought about private client work, you couldn't help but think about Marant. And I think that was something that stood out. I think Auger have done a really good job of that in recent years. And I think that their kind of coordinated approach and the way that it's clear that they've put thought into it. You know, they haven't just showed up at a few things randomly. They've thought about where they're going to be, who's going to be there, and the message that they're trying to get across. And it's obvious that that's been put together really well. So when you're doing things, make sure that you're doing it well, and that you're doing it again and again, and you're hammering that message home.
I don't think you can underplay or overplay the frequency thing. As Emma said, people say lots of things less. Saying it again and again. When you're really close to a business, you think like the message is shouting out to your audience.
Yeah.
You really think it's shouting because you're so close to it, and you see all the elements around you, and you've been responsible for the website, and all of a sudden you're going, well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's perfectly obvious, but you're living it every day. And that's where this eyeballs thing comes in. They've got to see the message, and once is not enough. So say it again and again. And when you think you're bored of saying that message, say it again twice as much, and maybe you'll get it through. I can't underplay that enough, that it's about frequency. As Emma's mentioned, listen and be absolutely prepared to change at all points.
Yeah, I mean, have a plan, really important, but also, you know, be aware of what's going on in the world, and be prepared to change. And that doesn't mean you don't have a plan anymore. You still have a plan. You've just changed the plan. So, you know, listen to the marketplace, see what other people are doing, you know, see what's happening in your industry. Is there a new opportunity? Has there been a law change? Has there been a recent case? Has something happened that people want to hear about? And stay on top of that and adapt. And don't just blindly market. You know, you've got to always be looking out and seeing what's happening in the world. But yeah, be prepared to change when you need to.
I think it's down to this thing that you should never ever perceive the brand or the marketing as pretty pictures. It's not. In some cases, it doesn't even need to be pretty. Effectiveness is the most important part, and knowing how well it's working, having the backup of the figures for the guys above you or around you, so that they know what you're doing is working, will also give you a little bit more courage and a little bit more bravery as well.
Yeah, so this one is again a bit of a just based on my experience of working in the industry for a long time. The people who care the most do the best. So you can't fake this, but as a professional, I think it's really important to show that you care, and whether you're an internal marketing officer or an external agency or consultant or a professional within the business, you need to show that you care. Clients can see when people care and when they're just going through the motions. And I think, you know, that's something that people often take for granted. And I think it's really important that the people I've seen in my experience in the industry that have done really well, yes, they've got the talent, yes, they've got the experience, yes, they've got the knowledge, but what is it that's really made them progress in their career and therefore their firm do really well? It's the fact that they give a damn, and their clients can see that. So that's something, just a personal thing that I think is really important.
Emma, just to add to that, I mean, I think in the services world, if you look at, say, the relationship sometimes between fiduciary trustees and lawyers and tax advisors,
Yeah.
it can be difficult because the trustee or the fiduciary needs to go to the expert in law or tax in whatever jurisdiction and feel like that tax advisor is working with them on their side, not some kind of judgmental or going to make that person feel as if they don't know, So it's, I think in our setting, it's like, it's also it's having that approachability, isn't it? Even though you're in a, intellectually demanding environment, you don't use that over someone else. You kind of like, you bring that caring mentality to sort of say, look, we're all in it together. And if you want to give me a call to talk about any matter, I'll give you the time of day without making you feel small, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So that's important, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's that approachability, David, and being able to pick the phone up to someone, even if they're a litigator, God forbid.
Yeah.
Being able to pick up the phone and talk to them is really important, and will win you business and help you to develop relationships, which is ultimately where referrals are going to come from those relationships.
One of the things that I found, being a relative newbie into the financial sector branding, is authenticity comes up a lot in people's values. Being authentic, knowing what you stand for and living by it. It all sounds very big and grand, but actually people will love you more and respect you more for that. And in an industry that's based on relationships, you need that.
Yeah, which comes on to, I think, quite neatly, Gary, onto this point about trust. Trust is absolutely key in professional services. You can have, having an amazing brand that people understand and connect with is key, and trust really is at the heart of that connection. So yeah, I think trust is absolutely crucial more than anything else within the professional services sector. Living up to your brand promises. So you've come up with an amazing brand, and you've got your mission and your vision, and you've got it all laid out, but you have to actually live up to that brand promise, because unless you do that, people won't trust you. If their experience of your brand is not what you say it is, then you've lost them, and you'll never get them back. So that's really important. Gary, do you have anything on trust?
I'm a trustworthy guy.
There you are. And yeah, another personal personal experience point from me here: be one of the good guys. And this sort of, again, it's sort of all these points lead on to each other. At the moment, there's a lot of talk in financial services in the sector about sustainability, and it's a real buzzword at the moment. But one of the things I think is really important is doing the right thing, and that never goes out of style. So that's relevant wherever we are. And I think being one of the good guys is really important, and instilling that into your partners and fee earners is really important. I've seen over my career people make mistakes, and they've really come back to bite them and the business, whether it's being rude or being aggressive with a legal directory researcher, or whether it's being difficult with, as David said, one of your competitors or one of the colleagues that sits alongside you. That kind of stuff always comes back on you, and being the better person, being helpful, being supportive, getting involved in your industry, that's where you'll really start to build those relationships, and that's where business comes from. That's where those referrals come from. So be the person that's talked about for all the right reasons. Be the person that your colleagues at other firms will refer their conflict work to. Being one of the good guys is really important.
I think when I'm kind of an old guy now in the industry, and I'm trying to hand over my business to a younger lad. So I'm training him up, and I talk to him about the thing that's most important in the brand and design and web industry. It's not about how pretty the picture is. And I think you're getting that from me when I talk. it's about the relationship you have with the client, the relationship of the client with their clients. Relationships are the most important thing. I think, the last year or so has taught us a lot of things. And basically, we've got to care a bit more. I don't think we're in that period of money never sleeps anymore. That's not saying we're not going to make money, guys, but actually this whole thing about a sustainable message is becoming more and more important, becoming very important in the hotel industry and the hospitality sector, but also very important when you see big statements that are written by Lloyd's, JP Morgan, that set out what they stand for when it comes to sustainability, and the idea that it's not just all for oneself, that we are doing good as well. And just as an indication, when you are looking at, say, for example, if you're going to book an event or a conference, a lot of conference venues have to have a really good sustainability message, an ESG message, because it's part of the selection process with a lot of companies now. So being one of the good guys is the thing. I used to think it was part of the millennial thing where all, my 25-year-old son would talk about doing the right thing. It's permeating up now, even into us guys, where it's about doing what's right, being authentic, and doing something good. Sorry, I felt like I was waving a flag around there for a bit. There's not an MBE in the post, don't worry. Doing the right thing ultimately will benefit you. Emma?
One last thing. It's actually 4 things. So we wanted to kind of round up our little session today by, if you remember, if you only remember 4 things, these are the 4 things that we think it's really important that you remember.
So first one is go deep into your brand, what you stand for, where you want to be when you wake up and you throw back the covers. When I first started, what is it you're going to do? What is the thing you're going to provide? And then where you want to be. What's your chase the mouse? What's your vision? When you've got that and you understand the audience that you're talking to, find your voice. And by voice, I don't mean singing voice, although I'm sure some of you have got nice singing voices. I mean how you sound, how you look, how you feel, how your people talk, what the toilets smell like. All of that is part of your voice. Emma?
Be one of the good guys. I really do think this is important in the world today, in particular, as Gary said. I think that people are looking to businesses to be one of the good guys. Then I think that your message and your position and the way that you deal with the world and with the people in the world is important. And I think people are looking to businesses to get that right. So I think being one of the good guys as a brand, as a business is important, but also personally as professionals, because as we know, relationships with other individual professionals are really key. So being someone that people feel like they can pick the phone up to and have a chat with is actually important. Being someone who they're going to call because they have a spot, a panel at the latest industry conference, and so that they invite you rather than your 20 other competitors. Be one of the good guys. And then lastly, eyeballs, not osmosis. There's an impression sometimes when you're inside a business, as Gary said, that people know what you stand for, that people understand what you're good at and what you do well and the fantastic talent that you have within your firm. But don't take that for granted, because in all likelihood they don't understand.
No, they don't.
So it's about frequency, it's about having a clear message and getting it out there in the right places to the right people at the right time, and doing it repeatedly. I had the same experience as Gary with this. I've had lots of clients say to me, oh my goodness, I'm so sick of looking at this now. You know, it's so boring, our brand. Do we not need to change it? You know, we rebranded 6 months ago. I mean, it seems a bit boring now. Shall we change it? And it's reminding people that, well, you've seen it probably now thousands of times because we've worked on this whole thing, we've developed it. But your clients and the people the contacts that you want to see it have probably only seen it a handful of times. Maybe it's come up on their LinkedIn feed, maybe they've visited your website, maybe they've seen you at the odd conference. But in reality, it hasn't even begun to get through. Yep. So, you know, that point I think is really important.
I've got a client who is a search consultant for the legal sector in New York, and Emma and I worked on his brand, and he's a good guy. He's a really good guy, and he embraced all the things about the brand, and he lives it every day. And then he goes, I need to be seen. He said, why aren't people coming to me? I said, well, you're not visible. You're not out there. You're not engaging in conversation. You're not part of the conversation itself. And people don't know that you're one of the good guys. So we're now embarking on a little journey with him to make him stop relying upon osmosis for his brand and eyeballs. That's what it's about.
On that visibility point, Emma, I mean, obviously with COVID, firms have gone from a position where perhaps they relied very much on in-person, you know, meetings, you know, whether that's, say, the fiduciary on the plane to London or the key conference or, you know, the set pieces in the private client calendar that would allow people to get in front of people that matter. Obviously, all of that has been hacked away, and kind of content is king at the moment, isn't it, in terms of achieving that visibility? So are you seeing more firms who looking at the mix and saying, right, well, this live mix is actually not available to us at the moment, so how are we doubling down through different channels? Because there's so many different ways through which they could stay visible, and if they haven't really considered it before, are they starting to, you know, really think about those digital channels, not as a temporary sticking plaster, but as something that should be a cornerstone of how they're talking to the market?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I think from what I've seen, I mean, you know, platforms like PCD Club, David, have provided a tremendous opportunity for people to keep their visibility up, and there's lots of others out there, and I think that there's a few firms who were already doing it, who were able to very quickly just basically upweight their digital activities and make sure that they kept their presence up. I think there were some firms that just kind of sat and waited, thinking that it might all be over soon. And I think, you know, for them, that's been probably a bit of a steep learning curve. But yeah, I mean, I think digital, I think there's a lot of people who've dived a lot deeper into digital and now kind of seen the benefits of it and understand it a lot more and will continue using it. But I still think that in the private client industry in particular, people are desperate to get back to face-to-face, because ultimately that industry globally is pretty small, pretty niche. You know, there are and everyone knows each other, and they're desperate to be back in the room with their colleagues and talking to them in person. But I don't think that will go away. I don't think, for example, that in that industry everyone's going to say, oh, we're happy now just to, you know, not meet in person. We'll do everything online now. I don't think that's going to happen. It is very much a people business. It's, you know, it's being in the room with those people is really important. You've got to remember that ultimately those professionals are looking after families and their future, and you know, that their wealth and the way that they protect their family's future, that's a real, you know, that's a position of real responsibility. And the professionals that operate in that space have to be very careful about who they work with, who they bring in, and they want to know them really well. And I think they want to know them really well in person. So yeah, I definitely.
I think it's important to be part of the conversation. And I'm going to say again, it comes back to your values. It comes back to you being, if authentic is part of your values or searching is one of your values, then that's how you approach social media. And being part of the conversation, leading the thought, leading the opinion, being part of the opinion helps you create a community, a sense of community. What can tend to happen with people with social media is they immediately want to sell and tell how and talk about how important they are and how special they are. When actually, if you were in the pub and you were talking to the person, you wouldn't necessarily be like that. There'd be the blow and bluster for about half an hour, and then the cocktails would start, and then you'd realize what the person was really like. I think this authenticity and this participation and helping with the community is all part of it. I think it has far more power with your brand than telling everybody how wonderful you are, because no one believes it unless you are actually wonderful.
And it takes a long time, doesn't it, to build up a following, particularly in niche areas. You know, no private wealth firm is going viral with some content. The fact is that the audience builds steadily. So, I mean, Emma, how do you sort of keep people on track in terms of not being too downhearted when they're building an audience through different channels, particularly if they're starting out from a low base? How do they kind of keep on track without thinking, oh, you know, this just isn't getting the numbers?
Yeah, I think it's just about talking to them and understanding that, you know, it is a niche audience, and that it does take time. And I think just giving them, you know, making sure that you're giving them information. So, you know, even if the numbers are small to start with, being able to show growth, being able to show, you know, visibility and reach. Just sometimes those figures in themselves are enough to keep clients. If you're an agency or if you're an internal marketing person, just having that data is really important, and being able to show people that, you know, that you're making progress. Really, I think it's just about being able to show progress.
And I guess you need some qualitative wins as well, don't you, in a sense of you might not need loads of people viewing or engaging with the stuff you're doing, but if you get that one lead from the family office or from the niche contact,
exactly,
like, oh wow, you know, that's
as you know, in this business, David, it's high value, low volume. So, you know, you only need, as you know, I do some work with a family office. If you know, we only need one lead, one good referral source, and you know, it's not so much about the numbers. It's about the quality. It's about getting the targeting right, getting the audience right, being in front of the right people. So yeah, it's not all about the numbers.
I think it's about committing to doing it. I often advise clients about social media, and I go, it can easily die the death of neglect. So what happens is, sorry, I seem to have the loudest house ever. Now my dogs are going mental. So I'm going to get the gardeners to actually take off the head of the border terrier that's barking outside, because he clearly doesn't want to switch off the lawn trimmer. I think what can happen is people get into social media and they think they've got to hit it hell for leather. And then what happens is they can't sustain it. And you get downhearted about it, and then you leave it and then you neglect it. And then everybody goes, who were they? Because I never seen them anymore. So my advice is sustained long-term social media. And you might not get the results you want, but you're part of a community, you have a voice, and it will come around if you're in their eyes. It won't come around through osmosis, funnily enough. I think we've already established that.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour now. Thank you so much, Gary and Emma, for that very insightful session. We will send a replay out to all our members and share this through our digital magazine, which goes out to all our members and contacts at the end of each month. So thank you once again, Gary and Emma, for joining us today on the Power Hour. Next time, we're going to be speaking to Kirsten Burt on marketing metrics. So once you've kind of started implementing some of these strategies, you've got to work out how to measure them. So tune in next month for a very interesting session. But thank you to Gary and Emma, and good day.
Thanks so much.
No problem, guys. I'm going to go strangle my gardener.
Be a good guy, Gary. Bye.
Okay.